context, I'd like to thank the UK Government Prosperity Fund and ASEAN Economic Reform Programme, who support the project promoting a fair business environment in ASEAN. This project, called FairBiz, is working through its thematic platforms to build capacities in the private sector across the supply chains, focusing in particular on anti-corruption compliance and business integrity. The FairBiz thematic platform on diversity and inclusion was created in response to the acknowledgement that a fundamental aspect of business integrity is fairness of treatment and opportunities for both men and women. Raising awareness about this issue, exchanging knowledge on ways to build inclusive workplaces, and nurturing a network of companies in ASEAN leading in this area are among the key goals of the platform. This webinar is also supported by the Business and Human Rights Business and Human Rights Principle Project of UNDP Asia Pacific, and for that, we'd like to thank the EU for its support. The webinar is part of a series that started last month. Last month, we discussed the issue of gender equality at workplace in more general way, and also looked at how private sector companies are dealing with a crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. But today we'll be looking at gender equality, inclusion, diversity in the supply. I believe the world is coming to a consensus now that investing in women-owned businesses and integrating them into corporate supply chains is smart economics and good for business. Women-owned businesses contribute significantly to the world economy, generating millions of new employment opportunities and driving development. Despite this, currently there is a gender gap in the level of entrepreneurial activity across all regions due to the unequal playing field for men and women. Such obstacles include limited funding availability for women as a result of cultural and gender biases, women's time constraints given expectations about women's role as primary caregiver, and challenging business environment. Women-led and owned businesses are usually micro or small-sized businesses. Unlike their male counterparts, women-owned businesses do face a distinct set of challenges in addition to the challenges facing smaller businesses more broadly. For many women, their equal and fair participation in economic activities can only be guaranteed if the enabling factors are there that cater towards fostering gender equality in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. It's not just the women who need to act, it's what surrounds women who also need to act for change. Private sector can play a pivotal role in contributing towards the creation of these enablers for the purpose of closing the gender gap through proactive promotion of gender equality and the facilitation of fair and equal business environments through corporate procurement and others. And it's a win-win for companies too. Global research also shows increased participation by women-led business in corporate supply chains does also bring in significant benefit for the companies, including new innovation and stronger team engagement. So I'm excited to present to you today the opportunity to hear from the women from the private sector whose continued leadership towards gender equality will be beneficial for us all. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Kaur, and welcome, colleagues. It's great to see many of you joining the webinar today. As Kaur mentioned, we are very excited to have over 60 participants from across the world, including USA, Germany, and Turkey. So we are looking forward to a very rich discussion today. We just had the opening of the webinar by Miyaoi, who is UNDP's Regional Gender Advisor. My colleague has posted in the chat box as well regarding the instructions during the webinar. So as we have the discussions and insights from the speakers today, please feel free to share your insights and your comments in the chat box. And in addition to that, if you would like to pose questions directly to our speakers today, please also use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen to pose your questions. And also, if you would like to pose a question directly to our speakers, please use the raise hand function. And during the Q&A discussions, my colleagues will unmute you. I would like to now begin the session by giving you a short introduction of our speakers. I'm actually very excited today to introduce to you and moderate an all-female panel. I would like to start with our first speaker, Ms. Victoria Veloso, who is the global lead of the Supply and Category Excellence and also the Supplier Innovation Center of Excellence from Johnson & Johnson. The company is one of the largest healthcare company with over 58,000 suppliers globally. Since 2019, Victoria and her team have been driving the Supplier Social Responsibility Program in Asia Pacific with the aim of creating opportunities for all businesses. Next, we have Ms. Anusuya Krishnan, an executive committee member of the National Association for Women Entrepreneurs Malaysia, NAVIM. NAVIM is an association that supports women-owned businesses, promotes women's leadership, and advocates for the interests of women entrepreneurs with government partners. Ms. Anusuya has actively championed for projects that benefit women entrepreneurs, such as technology, leadership for women, and the future of work. Last but not least, our final speaker, Ms. Laila Tyabji. She is the chairperson of DASTKAR, a craft NGO she helped found. Ms. Laila has been working with grassroots artisans all over India for over 4 decades. Many of her most rewarding projects involve creating new livelihood avenues through craft for marginalized rural communities. She serves on numerous government and non-government boards and communities and was awarded the Padma Shri in 2012. We'll also hear from my colleague later in the session, Dr. Harpreet Kaur, who is the Business and Human Rights Specialist here at the Bangkok Regional Hub. She will be joining in to facilitate the Q&A discussion and providing the closing remarks. I'm sure you will agree we have a sort of a rich experts to discuss this issue today. Given the diverse background of our speakers, I would like to start by getting to know a little bit more about the work that they do. Victoria, I would like to start with you first. Johnson & Johnson, as we know, has had a long-standing commitment to supplier diversity and has won numerous global awards. Why is supply diversity a core value of J&J, and what has been the impact of this decision for the company and the communities that you work with?
Thank you, Shamha. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone and to my co-speakers. Happy to be here to participate in this important conversation promoting diversity and inclusion, leveling the playing field for diverse women-owned businesses in the supply chain. Johnson & Johnson companies have long recognized that diverse suppliers play an important role in the success of our businesses. Our credo has, since 1943, been the very foundation of who we are and how we operate, and our responsibility to our communities is clearly stated. Our credo is as relevant then as it is today, and we must do what's right for our local communities and our supplier partners. In 2018, we celebrated our Supplier Diversity Program's 20th anniversary, continuing with the clear recognition that small, diverse, and superior suppliers play an important role in the success of our business. Specifically, to support the communities in which we live and work, through wealth and job creation, to reflect the diversity of the consumers and the patients who benefit from our products. And thirdly, to respond to the requirements of our customers who expect Johnson & Johnson companies to share in their values. Overall, supplier diversity is procurement with a purpose, leveraging our big for good in terms of tangible impact. In 2019, the program reached 1.7 billion spent to diverse suppliers globally.
Thank you, thank you, Victoria. I would like to now ask the second question to Anusuya. Could you tell us a little bit about the vision behind Naveem and why advancing women's economic empowerment is the central focus of the association? How do you think supporting entrepreneurs benefit communities and the nation as a whole?
Hi, good afternoon. It's 12 past in Malaysia, and welcome to everyone. Yeah, I've been in NAWEM for about 10 years, and the whole context of economic empowerment, I believe, is a very good entry point to help women, to empower women in many other areas. Because with economic empowerment, you actually liberate women financially. And once you have that liberation, once you have financial freedom, women have choices. Because many of them are trapped in an environment where there are no choices because there's no financial freedom. They're dependent on to support them. So I believe that's one of our core principles, is to actually provide women with choices and to have them help them to get a voice in whatever conversations they are involved in. Yeah? Now, on your second point on why women entrepreneurship benefits the community and the nation. Entrepreneurship, whether it's based on, regardless of gender, creates one very important point. It creates jobs, and especially SMEs that become the cornerstone of all economies. It creates sustainable economies. And like I said, for me, the primary motivation is to create jobs. You have one entrepreneur, they may support a latent workforce. And COVID has actually brought something very important into focus. Yeah, if you look at households, many households today will require two incomes. Both the husband and wife will have to work in order to support the family. Yeah, to support the household, to manage the household, you need two incomes. Now, if a woman works in an environment where she does not have any flexibility, if she has to work from 9 to 5, or in some cases has to work beyond 5, then she has very little time for the family. I'm a firm believer in family-friendly work environment, and companies like J&J are very, very specific about that, because they do encourage women to have a very healthy family environment. But that does not apply to all SMEs. Yeah, SMEs, probably there might just be that one person handling that job. So providing flexibility becomes a challenge. So where women entrepreneurship can help is, while you may not have more time, what you can do is you can have more flexibility in how you use the time. Now, to give you an example, in Malaysia, there was this is even through today, more than 50% of the women drop out of the work environment when they have a child. And in Malaysia, it's very, very common that they do not come back to the work environment because of lack of confidence and so forth. So what the government did was, this is a government-funded project. They had something called HEARTS, and that was to skill the women and get them back into the workforce. But it did not work. It was very unsuccessful. Now, however, when they changed the project to help women get into some form of business where they could work from home, it actually, that was successful. So it helps to enable the latent workforce. Yeah. So I think that's why I believe entrepreneurship is very, very critical, because it actually helps to engage women still in the workforce, but giving them the opportunity to work at their own time and be able to manage the family as well. Now, to give you another example, one of my projects was to do a program on baking and to also include a program on entrepreneurship as well. Now, one of my success stories is this girl who quit her job because she had a 2-year-old, and she spends she gets her orders at 12 midnight. She bakes until 3 o'clock in the morning. The next morning, she sends her son to school, and she delivers all her cakes. And she picks up her son at about 1 p.m. And so she's able to have her cake and eat it too. Yeah. So that, I believe that definitely helps the community and for nation building as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anusuya. Now I would like to pose the third question to Laila. I know we discussed that when we usually talk about diversity and inclusion in the supply chain, the discussion is mostly towards how can we support small disadvantaged businesses and women-owned or women-led businesses. I was very interested to learn that some of DASTKAR's initiatives actually target the family unit because they're all involved in delivering the final product. Could you tell a little bit as to why this approach was taken and what has been the impact of this approach on the businesses in itself and in their families as well?
Well, I think what makes DASTKAR different from some of the other sort of women-led MSMEs is that DASTKAR works with crafts, with traditional crafts communities. I mean, we are not providing livelihoods or teaching skills to people who are out of the mainstream. We are actually targeting traditional craftspeople who, for one reason and another, have been increasingly marginalized as the world becomes more industrialized. So crafts communities actually are people who already have skills, and DASTKAR's role is to try and enhance those skills and teach them the other skills that they require to make their intrinsic hand skills into something which can be supported. In short, to teach them entrepreneurial skills rather than this mode of making something. In the Indian tradition, craft is usually a family activity. Men and women have different roles, and they very often do components of the final product in a way that has been carried on over hundreds of years. And an example is, say, leather craft, where it is the man who dyes and tans the leather and who then cuts it and forms it into whether it's a shoe or whether it's a bag or a belt. And then it's the woman who ornaments it and embellishes it by either embroidery or punch work or whatever. And that pattern, whether it is handloom weaving, whether it's pottery, whether it's many, many other forms of skill, are done by both men and women. The difference in the strategy that DASTKAR has chosen, and which many other sort of NGOs working in the craft sector have done, is to see that the woman is a partner. She's not just a passive pair of hands, and that she gets paid for what she does. She understands the value of her input into the craft. And when she understands that value, she can negotiate not just with the market and the consumer, but also with her husband or her father, because she knows how much that piece sells for, and she knows that it could not happen without her input. So we have found over the years that that's quite a good strategy, and that even in those crafts where the woman is the main producer, like embroidery, for instance, where in most parts of India it is the woman who embroiders, though we do have male embroiderers in Kashmir and in UP, that the woman knows exactly how much she is worth and her product is worth, because she also comes to attend the bazaars and exhibitions where her product is sold. And that gives her enormous strength. And the fact that she is paid separately for this means that she has her own bank balance and she can take decisions about how she wants to spend that money, whether she wants to do something frivolous like buying jewelry, or whether she wants to do something meaningful like sending her girl children to school.
Thank you, Laila. I think it's just been great to hear from all of our speakers on really looking at the ecosystem and seeing how you can, what are the structural barriers, what are the cultural barriers, and what sort of approach would be most useful in ensuring that women go on to become entrepreneurs and part of the labor force, and what are the sort of practical approaches that would really sort of support them. I think today, based on your responses as well, we have a very unique opportunity to bring in perspectives from both a multinational company, a women's association, and an NGO to discuss what the enablers that we really need to have in place to create that minimum standard for suppliers, as our speakers has mentioned, to ensure that women entrepreneurs are part of the sort of the marketplace. Anusuya, I would like to start with you first. Given your experience working with a wide range of female entrepreneurs, what do you think are some of these critical enablers from the perspective of suppliers that would promote greater diversity and inclusion in the supply chain?
Thank you, Shama. Well, if you take women, I just would like to just touch on two constraints that we face. Yeah, there are many, but just on two. One is human and social capital. Yeah, we have very little access to business training skills. And obviously we have very little access to business networking, because most of the time women are expected to run the household, yeah, to take care of the children. So we don't really network very well. And on top of the second constraint, of course, will be limited funds. Like, for instance, if you wish to qualify for a particular tender or some of these requirements that request for proposals, to qualify, you have to have perhaps a paid up capital of about, this is in ringgit, which is about 100,000. Now, that actually really means that women businesses and small businesses will be out of the playing field. Yeah? And in terms of training, yeah, women do require a lot of assistance with regard to business skills training, because this is, even for any businessman, this is not something we are inherently born with. And this is where we will require a lot of guidance. And women, because we have an issue with confidence, plus we have very few role models. Globally, we have very few role models who are very successful entrepreneurs in their own right. Yeah. While we may have many women who run businesses from a corporate perspective, but very few from a self-made businesswoman. Yeah? So we do like role models, we like confidence, and I think that's where coaching and mentoring is very, very critical. While skills training sets a base, you need long-term coaching and mentoring, and this, for a small business woman, they will not be able to pay for this. This in Malaysia, for example, it costs you at least $1,000 a month to get a certified coach. And that's beyond the means of many, many women. Now, the other enabler I would think is definitely the government. The government definitely plays a very, very important role by, if governments could introduce a policy, like one of the policies that the Malaysian government has introduced post-COVID is they have given double tax deductions, and they have given special tax deductions for certain support that is given by private enterprises. Like, for instance, the landlords, if they provide a discounted rate for rental, they do get tax allowances. Yeah. So in that way, what the governments could actually introduce is they could actually encourage private enterprises to use women suppliers by providing special discounts or special tax exemptions for women, for companies that use women suppliers. And if and on top of that, what the government could also do is actually create an initiative where they could certify and create a database of certified women suppliers, so that we could actually, join this pool of suppliers, and that would eliminate the risk averseness for those who are trying to use or who want to use women suppliers. So you again create an opportunity for women to play in that field. The third one, very quickly to touch, so that we can have more questions, is to actually private enterprises itself. There are two initiatives that I'm very, very keen about. One is called the Responsible Business Alliance, and the other one is the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. Now, both these initiatives, what they do is they have set a standard and they set a code of conduct from a social, environmental, and ethical point of view and also they train suppliers to meet this code of conduct. So what they also do is they also have a special audit, and suppliers who meet all these requirements and who meet all the meet audits then become their preferred suppliers. And this is very interesting to me, is because it's totally done on a private basis. For instance, RBA, which is the Responsible Business Alliance, has about 150 members, and it is a non-profit, and they work in 120 countries. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think these will be very good enablers to start with. Thank you.
Thank you, Anusuya. Laila, how do you think private sector companies can support micro and small enterprises to meet the minimum standard and really open up the opportunity for entrepreneurs to expand their businesses and access a broader market?
This is something that I feel absolutely passionate about, because usually the role of the corporate sector vis-a-vis the private sector or the sort of non-organized sector and women entrepreneurs and so on is always seen as funding, that they're supporting the organization by giving a grant or something at the startup thing, or it is seen as perhaps giving an order. But actually, I feel it is a middle ground, at least in the DASTKAR experience, where, as I said, we are working with multiple crafts and different techniques and materials all over the country, that the major lacuna for small craftspeople, whether they be male or female, but particularly so when it is a women's group, is things which make them more skilled in projecting and promoting what they make. And so it could be something like the packaging and the packing systems. It could be like photography, now that everyone is going online. It could be things like preparing a business plan or a stock inventory. It could be things like visual merchandising. These are all things that corporate businesses do as a matter of routine. They often have departments specifically for that. But this is the bit that is left out when it is a craft community, because they know how to make these things. They've been making them for hundreds of years, but they don't know two things. They don't have market knowledge about trends and things in the global and the domestic marketplace. And they really don't have an idea of how they can present this. And this is, of course, becoming more and more important, particularly now that people are going online. Your product has to look good and it has to be presented very well. And I feel that this is a component where the corporate sector can really do wonders in helping. It's something that I think would make a qualitative difference to the way that people look at crafts, that the way that customers look at women's products, and the way that they look at products that have come from rural India, I think, and also for craftspeople to learn how to even plan their production, how to do an analysis of sales, and as I said, how to make a business plan to use their resources in the best possible way.
Thank you, Laila. Very interesting points raised by both of us speakers on the sort of what really is needed to have that minimum standard. I would like to now go to Vicky. Victoria, as J&J being a large multinational company, how does the company contribute towards creating some of these enablers mentioned by our speakers today and more specifically for your suppliers?
Thank you, Shama. And yeah, I hear you, Anusuya and Laila, on the things that you've noted that private sectors, private companies such as my organization can do to help these small women-owned businesses. So to Shama's questions first, expanding a truly global reach of our inclusive supplier diversity program was a huge step in the right direction. Our program now stretches around the world, and we're better than in our region, coinciding well with our region's economic growth driven by market-focused economic reforms favoring women entrepreneurship. And likewise, the rise of associations like NAWEM that Anusuya is leading. So secondly, J&J's Asia Pacific Supplier Diversity Program. So here in the region, our aim is to tap into this small and diverse businesses as potential supply base through partnership with organizations such as We Connect International. That's currently, we have that global partnership with them. We Connect is a non-profit organization helping women-owned business succeed in global supply chains. So very similar to how I hear NAWEM is working, Anusuya. In 2018, the opportunity to bring the program to Japan coincided with the Japanese government's efforts to level the playing field for women, igniting women entrepreneurship. Johnson & Johnson embraced this historic opportunity to make a difference in Japan. In partnership with WeConnect and two other large corporations, J&J co-sponsored the very first annual conference for women-owned businesses. From there, we've since conducted Meet the Buyer matchmaking events linking J&J to potential diverse suppliers. As I hear the example from Anusuya of the difficulties, challenges of women going back to the workforce after giving birth, we're happy to say that we have found such a supplier in Japan. Waris is our very first certified women-owned business in Japan. It's a business that connects J&J to tap into a network of about 10,000 female freelance workers wanting to go back to the workforce after childbirth. Thirdly, we have a chartered work stream who has since mobilized the collective efforts of our procurement teams across the markets. Specifically, we're working to continue to simplify our procurement process, building toolkits, guidelines to enable potential diverse suppliers to gain entry to participate in procurement opportunities across our vast requirements. So you mentioned market access as one of the challenges for our small women-owned businesses. We're hoping that through these efforts, we're able to bring it down to the level of where small businesses can actually participate and qualify to support our requirements. We're likewise looking to provide clarity to our procurement groups as well. They do need education as well and guidance on how to qualify these small suppliers into our program and commit to inclusive sourcing. Additionally, we're likewise providing opportunities for our end users and stakeholders the flexibility to choose to work with diverse suppliers for relevant needs and requirements, introducing them to our diverse suppliers. Lastly, this forum through the UNDP network, as well as my co-speakers, NAWEM Group and DASTKAR, potentially, this provides us another channel to reach our target group of diverse suppliers, introducing them to our program and bridging that connection between these small businesses to large organizations such as J&J.
Thank you, Victoria. I think I agree with you from the responses from our speakers today. I think it's so far been quite an interesting discussion on, from both the supply and demand side, what sort of enablers that we need to have in place and how can we work together to bridge the gap currently that is preventing these small, medium enterprises and micro enterprises from accessing the market, and also how these pieces of enablers and the initiatives that we have contribute towards strengthening the entrepreneurial ecosystem as a whole as well. In terms of then moving forward and looking ahead, I would also would like to discuss with you the sort of some of the challenges that the sort of women entrepreneurs face, and in light of bringing in the issue of disruption and unexpected change, how these can pose a challenge, but also create a window of opportunity. I'm sure if there was a list for this year on the disruptions, COVID-19 would come first for many of us. Laila, I would like to start with you. I know earlier when we spoke, we discussed briefly about how the mobility restrictions and lockdown measures as a result of COVID-19 had impacted the artisan community. Could you speak a little bit more about some of the challenges you had faced and what approaches that you are taking and exploring to overcome some of these?
Well, I think that the craft sector has been so badly hit by COVID-19 that it's really difficult to give it a positive spin, but I'm going to try, because obviously craftspeople living in rural parts of India depended very much on bazaars, exhibitions, orders for their sales and for their earnings. And now all that has ended over the last 3 months. In fact, many orders have been cancelled as retailers and export buyers also face their own challenges. So what do craftspeople do, and what do NGOs like DASTKAR that work with craftspeople? I should perhaps put in that we work with about 750 different crafts communities all over India in 25 states. And that amounts to about 100,000 primary artisans, and of course many more who are involved in the process. So that's a huge blow that they've had. And it has come on 2 other previous blows. One was demonetization, which really affected everyone all over India, both the consumers as well as the makers. And then we had the imposition of GST, which we were all rather unprepared for the way that it was done. And so that had a huge knock-on effect. So this is really the third major blow that Indian craftspeople have had in the last 5 years. But this is the biggest one, because not only are the craftspeople affected, but the people who buy their products have been affected. So it's been a kind of complete impasse. How are we trying to work on that? Well, the strategy is really twofold. One is, of course, that it's very clear that it's going to be a long time before the global marketplace or the Indian marketplace is going to be what it was before, where people are going to go to exhibitions, where they're going to go to malls and shops and buy. But we are counting on the fact that somewhere deep in the human psyche is consumerism. People do love to shop. So what is the solution? The solution is very obvious. You have to go digital, you have to go online. And this is something which is going to be very new and very difficult for rural craftspeople. There are very few villages actually have the kind of Wi-Fi facilities. Very few craftspeople have computers and so on. But everyone in India does have a smartphone. I mean, even in places where people don't have the basic amenities, the need to communicate is there, and people have got phones, so mobile phones. So we're trying to use that as a way to see that craftspeople can put their products online and directly have that contact, where they're not controlled too much by what other people think is going to sell and make money for them, but where they can have a direct interface. Now, the advantage, of course, of online sales is that you do have the space, and also because it's not as expensive as buying an ad in the newspaper or whatever, the craftsperson can tell their own stories, and they can tell the story of the tradition. Because most Indian craft processes, whether they're textile or 3D, are very long traditions which have a whole story of myth and ritual and community. And this adds enormous value to the product itself. And online does give you that opportunity to put the craftsperson there, have him or her tell that story, show the process through a video or whatever. And we hope that will substitute for the touchy-feeliness of being able to go and actually buy and look at a product in real life. There is a problem, however, that craftspeople don't have the knowledge for it. And there again, I think, is where private companies and private players can help with their expertise and partner to teach craftspeople the simple skills of how to photograph a product, how to talk about it. And this is something that DASTKAR has been very actively doing in these 3 months, where we've helped craftspeople to make little home videos and send them to us, and then we do a little edit, send it back to them, and so on. And because it's a visual process, a craftsperson who's basically a creative person can understand this, even though he may be literate or neo-literate. And I have great hopes for this, but obviously it is a longish process. It's not going to be, the online space is very competitive and crowded anyway, but we do hope that this will be one way to bridge this barrier that has been created by COVID and lockdown. The second thing, am I running over my time, is that we have used this breathing point for craftspeople and for DASTKAR itself to evaluate what craftspeople should be making when the markets reopen, and that some products are more suitable than others. I think functional things rather than tourist souvenirs is going to be a long time before tourists are going to be traveling the way they were. A lot of crafts products, I think not only in India, but all over Southeast Asia and Africa, have been relegated to small tourist souvenirs, things that are memories of their travel. We are now sort of feeling that craftspeople should make more functional products, more things that can be used in homes, both for decoration as well as utility. And we are giving them that kind of design and product development assistance that they need to make that shift. I think high fashion is also an area which was a big money spinner for many Indian embroiderers, applique workers, even seamsters, tailors. But again, high fashion is, I think, something that is going to be on the back burner for some time. And we have to look at simple clothes with embellishments, but not overly ornamented, because I think designer parties and huge weddings are not going to be something that people are going to be indulging in for some time. So these are some of the ways, and I think that very, very important is the headspace, that we mustn't be gloomy. We must always look for the silver lining and not be too downcast by the dark clouds.
Thank you, Laila. That's a good message, and it's great to hear how you are really taking this opportunity to take a breather and reevaluate the market, and also to touch upon some of the challenges that you have highlighted. It actually relates to the existing gender inequalities and challenges that women continue to face in economic participation, and COVID in many ways just amplified these inequalities. And I think that's a great setting for my second speaker, Anusuya. I know, again, we discussed that the numerous challenges that women-led micro, small, medium enterprises face to keep their businesses afloat. And given the digital transformation and the new demands in the world of work, how do you continue to support your members to ensure that they have the right set of skill set to promote and market these businesses?
I think I can clearly understand Laila's challenge because
I think, sorry, colleagues, we're having a maybe technical glitch at the moment. So while we try to get Anusuya back online, I would just like to go straight to Victoria. Again, driving, I know based on our discussions, driving supply chain diversity also requires having the mechanisms to continually evolve in your approach and continue to adapt to new challenges that might come your way. And one of the key ones being that many companies find it very challenging to maintain their supply chain, especially given that smaller suppliers become acquired by larger companies, and in most cases end up losing their diversity certification as well. From the point of J&J, what could be some of the approaches companies could take to ensure that the gains they make in this area are sustained over the long term?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Shama. We recognize those challenges, and in fact, there is one such. I wanted to share this particular event that we conducted to address that particular challenge. We called it Procurement Supplier Peer Ideation event, hosted by J&J. And again, it was an initiative that was specifically targeted to tackle that particular challenge. Increasing diversity spend for our R&D procurement has been a constant challenge, with small suppliers becoming acquired by others and losing their diversity certification. So very similar to the challenge you've posed, Shama. This has impacted more than 25% of our R&D supplier diversity spend. So in 2019, to help develop practical approaches to this challenge, we hosted the first R&D procurement supplier diversity peer ideation event focused on enhancing collaboration with small and diverse suppliers. These one-day events were attended by procurement teams as well as peer companies representing 9 of our pharmaceutical company peers, external advocacy partners, and diverse suppliers, generating ideas on ways to increase our collaboration efforts with small and diverse suppliers. Together, we are taking forward some of these practical ideas and currently evaluating others to pursue further. To the broader question on how we expand the breadth and scope of our supplier diversity program, ensuring that we evolve the approach and sustaining the gains over the long term. A key feature in our supplier diversity initiative is what we call the Tier 2 program, where we likewise encourage our major suppliers to embrace supplier diversity. So yes, small suppliers are taken over by big suppliers, but through this program, we influence our major suppliers to utilize diverse suppliers as they fulfill the J&J business requirement. Relevant KPIs at the point of selection or as part of their ongoing supplier performance management are properly monitored. The program then has a sort of a cascading effect down the supply chain of our respective suppliers. Secondly, we've expanded the scope, likewise, of our program, broadening the inclusion of the program to more diverse backgrounds, such as social enterprises, how these types of suppliers, or you could say organizations, and I'm thinking that perhaps DASTKAR, Laila's DASTKAR is one of those, how these types of organizations support differently abled, marginalized groups in the community, gain meaningful employment, or gain businesses with companies or with supply chains in large companies. We're also exploring bringing in LGBTQ-owned businesses. Again, another marginalized group within the community. Evolving the approach, on the other hand, includes helping these suppliers build capacity and capability to continue to strengthen their businesses. Again, I go back to what you mentioned, Laila, earlier around, helping your crafts folks probably get to learn about photography or marketing their products, gaining these skills on digitization. Yes, it will be a long process, but let's take small steps at a time. So we have since rolled out events such as Women Mentoring Women-Owned Businesses. This was launched in 2017 in our North America region. A first-of-a-kind reciprocal mentoring program that matched 22 women leaders in procurement roles in Johnson & Johnson with women-owned business enterprises owners. So we are looking to see how such programs could be conducted, bridging the needs, targeting specific needs of these small businesses, challenges, problems that they have, and matching those with skills likewise that are available within our organization.
Thank you, Victoria. I see that now Anusuya is online. Before I pose the question to her again, I would also like to remind our audience, please feel free to continue sharing your insights and comments in the chat box. And since we are now moving to the last question, if you have any questions you would like to ask the speakers, please write in the Q&A box, or feel free to use the raise hand function. Anusuya, could you please elaborate a bit more on the questions that we were discussing around how you're continuing to support your members by ensuring that they have the right set of skills that this new world of work is sort of demanding? Thank you.
Apologies for dropping out. Technology failed me there. So what I was touching on is we were very fortunate during the movement control order. We were approached by one of our partners, the Asia Foundation. They had actually received some funding from the Lotus Circle, and so their interest was to roll out a project very, very quickly to help support women businesses. So what we did was we introduced a program which helps the women transition from offline to online. And one of the major things that we did was, that's the first project where NowM came in, is we had our women act as mentors. Because most businesses, there will be some critical areas where they will require a lot of assistance. So we had identified these few areas, and the women were basically addressed. Our members came in as mentors, financial mentors. This was one-on-one mentoring. Yeah, so we specifically identified what were their needs, and in what areas could we support them. And this was all conducted online, so we had a cohort of about 20 women-led businesses. As I mentioned the last time, women-led as opposed to women-owned. Women-led is where the woman is the decision maker, and they may the person may only have 10%, or in this case, most of them were micro enterprises, so they were probably husband and wife owned companies, but where the woman was a business decision maker. Yeah. So the second project that we have also started is also to help companies transition their business online. And a few things that Laila mentioned to me make a lot of sense, because when you transition online, it is a completely different ballgame, where it's just like any other store. You can have a store, you can open up a store, nobody comes and visits your store, you make no sale. And one of the issues about transitioning online is being able to use your tools more effectively, being able to conduct your business. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to help women be very clear about the strategy, and that the strategy must be data driven. It cannot be anecdotal. Yeah. So that's one of the areas we're focusing. So because once you have your strategy, then your operations will reflect what your strategy is. You will then have your finance to reflect what your operations are going to be. How are you going to buy? Are you going to buy in bulk? And so you get you do better sourcing, and finally, of course, then comes marketing. So what we are then doing is, this whole thing is a cycle, and this is where we want the women to be very clear. Once you go through this program, we also have two interventions. We have coaching. We have 3 checkpoints where we will see what has happened so far in terms of your business. And we also will have the mentoring. Mentoring is more specific in certain areas. For instance, when it comes to finance, there will be one-on-one mentoring. Now, what we also want to do, the purpose of having the checkpoint is for women to reflect what worked, what did not work. And if something did not work, you have to go back, pivot, and look at your strategy again. So transitioning online, that's the benefit of having technology. Technology really allows you to look at your data. So it will require them to understand what was the level of engagement that they had online. And if their collaterals were not engaging enough, what can they do? And how they would use data analytics. So these are the things that we are specifically will be addressing, introducing to them when they transition online. So because business online will be a completely different ballgame. So that's something that we want our members to understand. The other thing that we did last year was also very relevant to this. We did a series of workshops called Data for Her. And that was a follow-up on our conference that we did last year, which is called the Industry 4.0 and the Future of Work. That was initiated primarily because we, from the World Economic Forum, we understand that data is very clear that when technology becomes the main motivator, business motivation, or the business enabler, there will be a lot of jobs that will become redundant. Yeah? They will become obsolete, and women will have to learn new skills, especially since we form the base of most businesses. Huh? So what we wanted was for women to encourage women to become more actively engaged in data science. So what we had was our speakers were all women, data scientists, women, data analysts, women, So we wanted, and they are very young women. Yeah. So we had, our group was very interesting. There were many who were much older, more in their 60s and so forth. And it was very interesting that it was very enlightening as well to see how you could use data and how insights can help the business. Not only is it to encourage women to participate in data science, but to also use data to drive your business, because that data gives you business insights, which you will not get in any other form. And today, that's one of the best things that helps us. Yeah. The fact that we are inundated with data, big data being the case. So it's a good time for women to embrace that and see how we can use that to make our businesses stronger. The good thing was it was in partnership with one of our members. It's called the Center for Applied Data Sciences. So they have started a chapter for data for her work, and we are rolling out. So we hope to roll out a few more. And as I was saying at the start of the session, that if any other country would like to roll out data for her, we'll be more than happy to help them with this process. Yeah.
Thank you, Anusuya. Thank you, speakers. I mean, this has been a really rich discussion, focusing on what are the enablers we need in the current ecosystem to ensure that women continue to be part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem as well as the supply chain. But again, looking ahead, how can we ensure the sort of technological advances that are coming our way, to use that as an opportunity to enhance women-led businesses and their marketing strategies. And I think I'm sure our audience have also taken away really good messages and practical approaches that they can also think about as they move ahead with their businesses as well. Thank you all again. Now I would like to ask my colleague, Dr. Harpreet Kaur, to come in and facilitate the discussions with our audience and you, our speakers. Thank you. Harpreet,
thanks,
over to you.
Shrama. Thanks, Shrama. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And big thanks to Victoria, Anusuya, and Laila for an extremely enriching discussion. I think I do personally have a lot of questions, in follow-up to many of the points that you raised. But I'm going to behave and do what I've been asked to do, is to sort of also facilitate the questions from the participants. I think there are a lot of questions coming, particularly on the future development of gender equality at workplace and the WG programs. What do you think it means for businesses to conduct WG programs? For example, what do we expect companies to do in order to help? Also, I think there was another question in terms of, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 situation, how do you think the virus has hindered the implementation of these projects? Any specific sectors or industries that you see have really pushed the issue of WG further amidst the situation? Anusuya and Victoria, perhaps if you could come in. I do have two specific questions for Laila at a later stage. Thank you. Anusuya, over to you.
Sorry, you when you say WG, it means
it's the gender equality at workplace projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually,
so
yes.
Sorry, if I could just also illustrate, this is also the time when, companies are firing, they're kind of, there are lots of staff, I mean, there is kind of a situation where, the businesses and the companies are also thinking about staff retention, and, women, considering they're often at the lower end of the supply chains, they're mostly in the precarious work conditions. They're generally, they end up being the first target, when layoffs happen. But also in terms of, prioritizing funds, some of the points that you raised about, coaching, mentoring, trainings, capacity building, all of these would also require funding from the organizations or from the businesses. But given the situation, the priorities for the businesses perhaps are also changing. So how do you think that is impacting, or have you had any experience, where you see that these programs on gender equality are being relegated to a backseat given the COVID-19 situation? any specific sectors you think have suffered more than others? Thanks.
Well, I checked some data, because of the webinar that we're having, and we have a social. This is one of the agencies under the Ministry of Human Resources that basically looks that has presented some data, because they actually collect data on what's happening with the organizations, all registered companies that contribute to. We have a employee insurance scheme and so forth. So what they have reported is the number of loss of jobs has been higher for men than for women. But they also noted that that's probably because the workforce, there were more men in the workforce than women. So this is impacted both, and I would think that, okay, my initial reaction would be, I think a lot of things like gender equality and so forth will take a backseat. That is my own personal view, because currently the interest is on how employers can sustain the existing workforce. So salaries have been cut, some by 30%, some by 50%, and I also noticed that, I'm also part of this group which is more of a Facebook group, Women's Innovative Entrepreneur Network, where I suddenly see there's a surge of women trying to do multiple things to hold more than one job, and they are using their own skills, whatever skills that they have, and it usually relates to having more involves food. That means they're looking to how they can actually supplement the income by creating perhaps things that they are more comfortable with. They use their skills to earn additional income. And I think that's where organizations as NAWEM can come in, because my perception of, or so far my experiences, because I do buy quite a bit from these women, is they don't have a proper structure. Hence, that's why what I was sharing with you, the need to transition and to support the gig economy, I think is very, 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 very important. Because if COVID were to proceed, if we have a second wave, this is the reality on the ground. Whatever businesses are out there, they need to be able to sustain themselves, and women especially have to learn how to sustain ourselves. And I think the digital economy really is the way to go. And what I would suggest is, like, organizations such as NAWEM, and this is where we have stepped up. Seriously, I'm very happy to note that when we call for mentors, when we look for coaches, these are all services, CSRs that the women are willing to provide. And I think this is where we can actually assist. We can build, perhaps one of the projects that I am actually looking at is how we can create a better engagement with the gig economy. Currently, the gig is very informal. If I am a business person and I want to use someone to do my artwork, for example, or to create my jingle or my collaterals, when I work with a freelancer, it's very, very informal. There is no structure. So one of the projects I'm actually looking to do is how we can build perhaps an engagement platform, and where we can also even be able to engage perhaps a micro business to engage a gig economy. So you can actually empower the latent workforce in that way. That to me would be more sustainable, where women can actually do maybe more than one job and eventually earn additional income, and instead of just depending on a job for their livelihood. But as I mentioned earlier, one of the major issues is many of them are not familiar with the business environment. So they really do need advice, and they do need training and how they can actually conduct the business in a more business-like manner, rather than doing it in a very informal way.
Thanks, Anusuya. Victoria, have you seen, in your operations at your business, the the programs on gender equality have taken a backseat in the current situation, or how are you managing that balance between, trying to ensure that the business sustain, but then also ensure, you initially sort of started talking about how that's in your, how that's, how gender equality is part of all of your guiding principles, right from the beginning. How are you trying to maintain that balance?
Yeah, thank you, Harpreet. My response would focus on our supplier diversity program. Okay, so again, this program will continue to support women-owned businesses, which is a major group within the program for us, especially here in Asia Pacific. We need to double down on our efforts, especially now with the in the aftermath of this COVID pandemic. A number of small businesses are struggling. We see them struggling, looking for support. Building on the successful events we've conducted, I shared with you earlier the Women Mentoring Women initiative. Here in the region, we plan to roll out this year a capability program for diverse suppliers in a skills-based volunteerism approach. We have since refocused our target to really hear from our diverse suppliers what are the specific problems and challenges that they have right now. Again, in the aftermath of this health situation, and from there we are building a series of skills building webinars or targeted solutioning exercise, and matching them with skills with the volunteers from our employee base. We see this as a win-win opportunity to support diverse suppliers in our community, while at the same time, it's a talent development opportunity for our employees. Are these programs taking a backseat? No. More and more, the realization and of course the awareness that at this point, we need to double down on all these efforts and ensure that we continue to engage with our suppliers, understand what their problems are, and work together in a collaborative fashion to ensure that we are supporting them as much as we can.
Thanks, Victoria. I hope other businesses are, take inspiration from you and do not take away the focus from these programs. Laila, my next question is to you. And, in some ways, Anusuya also, talked about how do we need to better engage with gig economy. And there's a question for you from one of the participants. It says, have you tried or had any success in bringing corporates in the technology space to provide tech solutions or digital support through pro bono initiatives? I think this could really support your base of craftspeople to leverage the digital space. So if you've had any experience, with sort of trying to get into bringing in more digital, bringing in kind of more digital technology in your work, if you could share your experience with us. Thank you. Over to you.
Well, I think that certainly everybody has realized that the digital space is the one to enter and to be active in. I can't say that we have in this had very much support from the corporate sector because I think everyone in India is really very focused on their own economic crisis, which has hit the economy from top to bottom. So, but we have had support from private individuals who have come and said that they would be interested in volunteering and helping with us on this. And it is something that we hope to go further because we do have to market craft, even if it is online, slightly differently, because you must remember that DASTKAR works with you talk of diversity, nothing could be more diverse than the kind of mix of people and skills and products that we work with. As I said, over 100,000 craftspeople making everything from terracotta to textiles, from baskets to bouquets. And it means that it has to be marketed in a very different and skillful way. And we have to face the fact that some things do look very good online, and there are other products which consumers, when they come to a bazaar, they might be looking for, say, a waste paper basket or for a kitchen spoon, but it's not their priority when they go online. So the more spectacular things, the more intricate and ornamented things do look better on an online platform than these more utilitarian, mundane activities. And yet the craftspeople who make these things are as needy, if not more, than the ones who make the very sophisticated products. So how do you do that? These are all questions with which DASTKAR is wrestling. And we are very anxious as an NGO that works with, which is a need-based NGO, to find solutions for those small craftspeople who otherwise would be really elbowed out of the online space.
Sure. Thanks, Laila. We only have, unfortunately, time for just one last question, and I think that's a question I'm going to raise to all the panelists. But please, also use that opportunity as your last closing remarks for this. Each of you, if you could take about 2.5 minutes, I think we'll have enough time for closing. So, Laila, you mentioned, some of the challenges that you are facing. Anusuya mentioned some of the challenges that you are facing. In terms of kind of managing the situation, particularly in the given context. Victoria, you mentioned how you are able to continue these supplier diversity programs, and you also mentioned that it's only going to go more rather than relegated to a back seat. What is your ask to organize? What is your ask to organizations such as UNDP, which is engaging with businesses to create dialogue with government counterparts and civil societies to also implement sustainable business practices and business integrity? What kind of support do you think you would appreciate receiving from UNDP? And if we could provide you any kind of support in ensuring that gender equality programs are not relegated to a backseat, or also in a way that you're also able to support the marginalized workers, particularly in the given situation. Laila, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think that a whole sector which has been ignored in this, and which I obviously as an NGO feel quite strongly about, is that both the craft sector in India, and I'm talking of India, is not really recognized as something which has huge potential, but which is also at the moment in great need. And then you have organizations like DASTKAR, the NGO sector, who are the support of craftspeople, of the craft sector, because crafts fall out of the safety network of either the below poverty relief programs or the MSMEs, because they are not formalized and recognized as such. So craftspeople do depend on the NGO sector, and the irony is that the NGO sector, I mean, if you take DASTKAR's example, with great pride we used to say that for the last 15 years, in fact 20 years, DASTKAR has not been subsidized or funded either by government or by international agencies. We are totally dependent on what we generate in terms of revenue through our programs. But that has obviously died now. And we are in a situation where we actually cannot give the support that craftspeople want, because we ourselves don't have funding. So I think that the governments and organizations like UNDP should think of this network of NGOs who are playing this quite strong role and look to see how we can help it. We have had very, very generous donations from private individuals for the artisan support scheme, through which we're giving relief to artisans. But we actually don't have anything to sustain ourselves as an organization. And in this time of flux, where we're looking at new strategies and solutions, unless we have some of that hand-holding, we're not going to be able to manage. And I think that we don't have to think entirely in terms of cash, but we have to think of support in other ways, and skills training, mentoring, business strategies, etc., are something that I and many, many other small grassroots organizations all over India are very much in need of at the moment.
Thanks, Laila. I can say, or at least, on the project's behalf that I manage and lead on is, we do have a very active project on business and human rights in India country office, and I'd be happy to connect you with, the country office colleagues as well as the partners who have been in this space and could provide at least some sort of a trainings and the kind of support that's available. Thank you very much. Anusuya, if you could just take 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. I think where UNDP can play a major role, I can already see it from this webinar itself, that you can actually be the bridge, because what Laila requires is she needs support from NGOs. Now, Malaysian NGO, we can reach out to global NGOs. Now, we are a business association. We have women who will look for suppliers. We have a lot of women who do garments. We have women who make their own items. So they will be sourcing for suppliers. And clearly that's something that UNDP can actually help us to act as a bridge between our women NGOs with the organizations that require the assistance that we can provide. That's one. And obviously as a women NGO, and particularly being a women entrepreneurship NGO, I think UNDP can also act as a bridge, connecting us to MNCs. For instance, I would certainly follow up with Victoria to see how we can collaborate. Yeah. So this is one of the benefits of bringing women together. We can actively promote each other's services, and this is where I think if we can create an ecosystem where we can actually benefit each other, not just from a countrywide, but from regional. And, besides being a tool for business, digital has also enabled us. And, this webinar is a very good example. Many people have embraced the need to do Zoom. I think tomorrow Zoom is going to become a word by itself, a noun, for instance. So yes, that's where I would see UNDP being a very good bridge to connect all of us together. And just by doing that, we can actually assist each other. And I think that's more productive than providing finance, because to me, finance is just giving a fish, but teaching us to fish will be far more important for us. Yeah. And thank you very much for having me on this webinar.
Thank you very much. I see already networking happening here. Great, thanks. Victoria?
Yeah, sure. I echo what Anusuya and Laila has mentioned, that bridging, be the bridge. UNDP can influence a lot by being that bridge, connecting the network of NGOs and private sectors, just such as my organization, to continue the work. Specifically, the need for us is in J&J. So while we are trying to simplify as much as we can the process for small suppliers to be able to enter and participate in our procurement processes, we still do have a formal qualification process. Okay, and currently that qualification process is predominantly for women-owned businesses. And I mentioned earlier about WeConnect. Our partnership with WeConnect International allows us to identify qualified suppliers as women-owned businesses. Now, a great majority of the small businesses, particularly in Asia, are the small and medium micro enterprises, right? That's well recognized. However, the challenge for us is that we don't have a clear qualification process for this small businesses. How can we work together to connect and lobby and create such a process to allow multinationals such as my company to work with these businesses? There's a clear need, and I know that by working together, we can move forward. There's a lot to be done. We've just started, and as I've always been mentioning, we need to double down on our efforts to drive diversity and inclusion and deliver positive impact to our communities. The time is right with partners such as UNDP, NOEM, and DASTKAR. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I look forward to connecting beyond this event.
Thanks, Victoria. Really, really enriching conversation. I think also the answers kind of really, I think in some ways it does provide us also directions for our future programming, and also pushes us to sort of think about the ways that we can bring together these different different organizations, different sectors, but also act as a bridge. So thank you very much. We'll try to do our best here. And I'm saying that on behalf of all the organizers. Participants, there's also, there is also an evaluation survey. You can see the link on your, you can see the link in your chat box, but also there's going to be a QR code that is just going to be displayed on the screen. So please go ahead and also submit the evaluation form. It just helps us to do better. It helps us to ensure that we are bringing the kind of conversation and the kind of issues you would like to discuss. So thank you very much for that. I think all of us have thanked a number of times to Victoria, to Laila and Anusuya, but again, just a big thanks for this enriching conversations. I think some great messaging around what needs to be done, and also about the value of bringing women together, the women groups together, but also coordination and networking. So thank you very much. We look forward to working with you in the future. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the donors who supported our projects, the UK government's Prosperity Fund and the ASEAN Reform Economic Program for FairBiz, and the government of Sweden for the Business and Human Rights Program. I'm mentioning these two programs, but also at the UNDP, across all our projects, across all the work that we do, gender and women, remains a cross-cutting theme that we try to ensure, bring in more equality in all the projects, activities, as well as both from the designing as well as implementation phase that we work in. So thank you very much to all the donors who have supported us. Just sort of in terms of just kind of closing, I think some of the key issues that were brought about is, I think, Anusuya, you started by saying, how it's important for women to have that financial freedom to have the choices. And I think end of the day, it all becomes to the kind of choices that they have access to, but then also how do they exercise? What are the enablers that help them exercise those choices? We did talk about, and thank you again, for bringing up issues about the lack of, the lack of capacity, the lack of human and social capital that women, that women and the women entrepreneurs face, limiting funding that's available, very, very few role models. I think I see, I see, in all of you three, I see strong role models, but we need to sort of bring in more role models for women also to see that, they can survive and they can excel in the fields that they're going to be working in. And that's where, we bring the value of, I think we just keep underestimating the value of coaching and mentoring. And there's just so much, and I can say that from my own personal experience, being coached, being mentored by some of really great women that I had had the opportunity and the privilege to work with. But I see the value of, when you say how important coaching and mentoring is, and the role that, and the role that that the government needs to play, the role that the businesses need to play, and the need for coming together and working in collaboration rather than being isolated in your own pockets. I think that's those were some of the key messages that all of you mentioned. We also talked about the digital space and the gig economy, and how all of us are forced to also look into the digital space, but we also need to ensure that this that this diversity, that this digital space is also truly inclusive, as much as it gets diverse, we have to make sure that it's truly inclusive, because there are also big risk of running it into a digital, further widening the digital divide, particularly considering many women, may own the phone may be in their names, the connection may be in their names, but, they may not even have the access to use the phone, they may not even have the money to recharge their phones. So I think it's also about thinking, when we're looking at solutions, I think we also need to look at, we also need to sort of understand and mitigate the risk as we go along the process. But just in end, I think building the capacities of suppliers to value and implement diversity and inclusion is at the core of building back better commitment. Building a workplace community that supports women to grow, thrive, and provide your contribution is essential to ensure fairer and inclusive businesses. Just lastly, I think promoting women's businesses, women's entrepreneurship through corporate procurement is a great opportunity for closing the gender gap and contributing towards the sustainable development goals. And with that, I would like to close and also take the opportunity to thank all the colleagues, all the colleagues. You haven't seen them on the screen, but there's also a team that worked to make sure that this this webinar is run well, and we bring you these great conversations. So thank you also to my colleagues, particularly for contributing to organizing this webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Yeah, have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks.